This box merges two things that I love. Kuretake recently released this new palette of Gansai watercolors that are based on some common colors from the Art Nouveau movement. Hi folks, I'm Chris, and if you're new here, welcome to the channel. I received this palette recently as a gift, and I thought that it would be fun if we went through it together. Okay, but what is Gansai, you may be asking, and how is that any different from other types of watercolor? Well, all paint is basically some kind of pigment with some kind of binder to keep it all together and make it stick to the page. Now, Gansai, which is a traditional form of Japanese watercolor, is usually made with some kind of natural binder like honey or wax or sugar or starch. Well, you get the idea. As best I can tell from available information, the binder in these specifically is glycerin, possibly derived from beef fat, but I didn't find 100% confirmation of that, so don't quote me on it. Either way, this is different from the Western style tube watercolors because most of these use gum arabic as their primary binder. Because of their binder, Gansai tend to be a little glossier in finish and a little less transparent. You can use them very thick like a gouache or very thinly diluted as watercolor, and the color tends to stay more vibrant when it dries. Now, this is a general statement. As with all things, there's a little fuzziness around the edges because you can find Western watercolors with, for example, honey as a binder, and some Gansai also use gum arabic. So another characteristic of Gansai that sets it apart is that they come dried in these wide pans instead of wet in a tube. You can get Western watercolors in a pan, of course, but they're different from the Gansai because they still use gum arabic as their binder, and they're just a dried version of the same paints that you're going to find in these tubes. Gansai are traditionally applied with a large brush, and the pans are bigger to accommodate that. Now, the natural binders allow it to dissolve more easily and, I think, smoothly into water, so there are no issues with reconstituting it after it dries out, like you can sometimes have with some brands of tube watercolor after they dry out in your palette. Now, while you can mix them directly, Gansai are generally mixed through layering on paper rather than on the palette, and too much mixing can muddy the color. So to use them, you wet and paint right from the pan, which has given me the bad habit of doing the same thing with my tube watercolors. You may have seen me in other videos grabbing some paint with a wet brush right from the mouth of the tube. Don't be me. It's really not good for your tube paint, even if it is really convenient. This collection of colors is a sample across the range of the Art Nouveau movement, which stretched across the turn of the last century, 19th into 20th. That movement emphasized intricate, detailed craftsmanship in organic forms and materials, using natural colors to blur the line between industrial and natural, inside and outside, waking and dream. Now, I am working on a more in-depth video on incorporating Art Nouveau elements into your own art. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you subscribe to stay tuned. You can see here some of these colors in action from art of the time. One of the things that I like about the Kuretake boxes is that they have the swatching area printed on the inside of the top, and the corresponding number is printed on the bottom of the pan, so you can easily connect the pan to the right swatch, even for similar colors. And here are some examples of this paint in action. So, Kuretake Art Nouveau Gansai palette. What's the final verdict? My personal experience is that the Gansai paints match my use more than traditional tube paints. I am also very guilty of treating my watercolors like gouache, and Gansai paints are perfect for my in-between usage. If you use more water, it acts more like a watercolor, less water, more like a gouache. Now, technically, you can do this with any water-based paint, yes, but the Gansai seem especially suited to switching between methods on the fly because it sits in the middle between Western watercolor and gouache in terms of composition. Again, just my experience. One drawback to Gansai is that there doesn't seem to be much focus on light fastness. Since I mostly paint for either digital production or for fun, that really doesn't concern me. But if I was going to paint for something with the intent of selling the original directly with no prints, I might avoid the Gansai or only use them for underpainting. I do have two concerns about this palette in particular. I've used a few older Gansai collections, mostly Kuretake, and this palette seems to maybe have a slightly different formula from what I'm used to. I'm not sure yet if they have changed the formula of the paints overall or if it's just specific to these colors, but they seem to be a little chalkier than I'm used to, both when they're wet and when they're dry. And I suspect that these may either have a different binder or less binder than what I'm used to because they also lifted even easier than I was expecting, even after they were dry. And second, I had some issues that I have never had with watercolors before. I usually go back over the inked lines to do touch-ups, and I always let it sit for at least 24 hours first to make sure that everything is dry. I left it longer than that this time, so I know it was bone dry. Unfortunately, I still got fuzziness around the edge of the line as though the paint was absorbing the ink. It made the lines around some of the leaves bigger and less crisp than I intended. Ultimately, though, neither of those concerns are really going to stop me from using these paints. They're just things to remember when I do use them. And I do love these colors. Overall, given the issues, I'm going to give this 8 out of 10 sunflower seeds. So if you've enjoyed this review, don't forget to like and subscribe and click the bell to be notified when I post new videos. And if you really like this video, there will be a link to my Patreon somewhere on the screen and down in the description below. A massive thank you to my patrons. I really couldn't do this without you. I'll also leave a link to the Kuretake Art Nouveau palette, just in case you want to try it out for yourself. I'll be back with another video in about a week or so. And until then, happy creating. This box. This box merges two things. Hi folks, I'm Chris, and if you're welcome to the channel, and if you're